Hello, I am Thomas Noguera, and today I'm going to talk about Alone, a poem by Edgar Allan Poe. Alone was written in Poe's youth. He wrote it when he was 21 years old. The publication of this poem was posthumous because it was published after the death of his author, almost 25 years after his death in 1875, and it was published on the monthly literary magazine for illustrated readers, Scribner's Monthly. Edgar Allan Poe is a very known and very famous American writer. He was born in 1909 in Boston, and he died in October 1849 in Baltimore. He was an orphan. His father left when he was 1 year old, and his mother died when he was 2 years old. He's known for his short stories like The Telltale Heart, and well, let's talk a little bit more about his life. He was adopted, and he studied in private institutions which had some level of prestige, but he develops a gambling addiction while he was studying in those private institutions, which was one of his first addictions. One of the first he would develop in his future. He would also develop alcoholism, and this would lead to a depression. Let's talk about the summary, the poem itself. Uh, I have the poem has is just one stanza, but I've divided this one stanza in five parts. So the first one is from the first verse to the fourth verse, and it says, "From childhood's hour I have not been, as others were, I have not seen, as others saw, I could not bring my passions from a common spring." So we can see a first disconnection from normality, from the lyrical eye, and we can see that the narrative voice thinks he's different from the others. He feels lonely, which will be a common theme in this poem. Now, from verses 5 to 8, it says, "From the same source I have not taken my sorrow, I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone, and all I loved alone." He in this part he says that the things he loves pull him stronger towards loneliness because they're things that he's the only one that loves them. Now from verses 9 to 12, "Then in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still." He says in this part that the source of his depression and his loneliness lies in his childhood, which is very important for the analysis of this poem. And he also says, when he says, "was drawn from every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still," he's saying that what could save him from this pit of solitude and depression lies encrypted, and he can't have access to it, to what could make him happy. Then, from the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled, it is autumn tint of gold. So he brings up some imagery in this part, and he speaks about these things, these landscapes, and we as a reader can infer that he loves these things as the way he describes them, and these are things that for an observer lie far away, and this mean that the things that the other loves lie far away from him, and this pulls him towards stronger towards loneliness. And now the last part of the poem, lines 17 to 22. From the lightning in the sky, as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. So, we can see in this final part that the lyrical eye, the narrator, sees himself, or rather his loneliness, as a demon and as a kind of bottomless pit with no escape. He thinks that his loneliness is so within him that it's an unescaped fate which he must go. So, themes and subtopics. The main theme is solitude, loneliness, and it's also, well, it's the title of the poem, and that's the main topic around this poem. The narrator tries to explain where his loneliness come from where could it be. It also it's also about a withdrawal from society, like in the first lines when he says, "I thought as others were, I from childhood's hour I have not been as others were." He withdraws himself from normality, from society, and puts himself on the margins of society. He also explains some trauma. He says that he had a troubled a troubled childhood. Then in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, he gives he puts the source of his loneliness in his childhood, in traumas he had in his childhood. And this is important for the analysis we're going to make later on. And, well, he also wants to explain, like I've said, the origin of his solitude, of his depression. So, style. This is the formal aspects of the poem. It's 22 lines, verses long, and there's a quite explicit rhyme scheme, which are couplets in the form AABB, DD, AABB, CC, DD, and so on. Like from childhood's hour, I have not been, as others were, I have not seen. Every two couples of verses rhyme, and that's the rhyme scheme. Style. Literary figures, he used a lot of enjambment. Almost by every line, he uses an enjambment to chain the verses with one another. He uses a lot of imagery when he speaks about the things he loves, like the red cliff of the mountain and the sun that round he rolled. And he also Poe uses the anaphora, which is the repeating of the first word of a verse or a line. He uses from in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 verses. He uses from in as the first word of 8 verses. That is more than 1/3 of the whole poem, which he begins with the word from. Meter, we have 4 feet per verse. The first 11 verses are iambic. The rest are trochaic. Comparison with another work. I have to compare this work with another work I'm currently studying, which is Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse, and a German author. And Steppenwolf is a book that of a man who tries to seek the source of his solitude, uh, which is what Poe writes in his poem Alone. And I really think these two works are very are very alike in the seek of what makes a man lonely and what causes a depression based on the loneliness of a man. I recommend Steppenwolf very much to my fellow listeners. Critical overview. We can pretty safely infer that Poe is the narrator. He speaks about himself. He is the lyrical eye. As well, we know that Edgar Allan Poe had a pretty rough childhood as a gambler and as an orphan. He could have had some abandonment issues as an orphan, and yes, I think Edgar Allan Poe fits the character, which is the narrator in Alone, and I think he wants to explain. I think he wants to explain the source of his loneliness and his depression um, after many things that happened to him in his childhood. And it's also curious to see that this is one of the few poems in which Edgar Allan Poe uh, speaks about himself. And yes, I like this poem very much, and I recommend every listener to read it and give. Everyone should have their own opinion about this poem, but I recommend it very much for a individual reading. So thank you very much for listening to this kind of exposition podcast. I don't know. Thank you very much. Bye.